If you're like me, you probably like baseball. And I do, like a lot. I love baseball. But if you're like me, you also may be quick to cringe whenever the quote-unquote unwritten rules of baseball are brought up, oftentimes by older or more old-school players, coaches, or broadcasters. Now, some of you may already know what I mean when I refer to the unwritten rules of baseball, but some of you may not, even if you've heard of the phrase before. And that's okay. The unwritten rules are kind of hard to follow because they're unwritten. They may even discover a new unwritten rule a month or a year from now that no one had heard of before. But okay, I'm gonna try and break the unwritten rule of the unwritten rules and actually write down some of the unwritten rules. First, there are some of the unwritten rules that are just kind of goofy and don't really actually matter to the gameplay. One unwritten rule that's like this is to not mention a perfect game or a no-hitter while it's in progress. There's a lot of debate about this, and everyone has their own opinion over whether or not you can truly jinx a no-hitter or a perfect game by talking about it, but at the end of the day, it isn't really a rule that anyone takes too seriously, and it doesn't really impact the game that you see on the field, so we can kind of discard it for now. It's not hurting anyone. Most unwritten rules, though, tend to be regarding conduct on the field. Here's one good example. Do not bunt to break up a no-hitter or lean into a pitch to break up a perfect game. Now this is the rare case of an unwritten rule that I sort of agree with, although it's very heavily dependent on the game and season situation for both of the teams involved. Overall, I would agree that you shouldn't lean into a pitch to try and break up a perfect game. It's just sort of, not the nicest thing to do, and while I would agree that it can be unsportsmanlike to try and bunt to break up a no-hitter, I also generally don't think that there's anything wrong with it if the game's still within reach. Like, if it's the 8th inning of a 2-0 game in the heat of a tight pennant race, no team is in a position to just give away games, and I would argue that it's probably more unacceptable to refuse to do whatever is necessary to try and win, even if the opposing pitcher is chasing history. But beyond this point, the unwritten rules begin to get more and more unreasonable, and these are the rules that I bet that some of you were already thinking of before you even clicked on this video. For example, one of these unwritten rules is that you should not swing on a 3-0 pitch if your team is already comfortably ahead in the game. Another one says that you shouldn't try and steal a base if your team is comfortably ahead in the game. And in essence, what these unwritten rules are saying is that once a team's lead is large enough, they should just sorta stop trying to score runs. But that of course raises the question of how large of a lead is comfortably ahead in the game. Is it 4 runs? 6 runs? The beauty of it is no one really knows. On April 22nd, 2022, in the 9th inning of a 7-1 game in Washington, San Francisco Giants second baseman Thairo Estrada stole second base. Now, nothing would come of it. Estrada would be thrown out trying to score on a Brandon Crawford single, but the move still angered some Nationals players who saw this as Estrada showing off in a game that was already well in hand. But was it well in hand? The Giants would win that game, sure. But less than 2 weeks later, on May 5th, the Phillies would blow a 7-1 lead to the Mets in the 9th inning, losing 8-7. 4 days later, the White Sox would blow an 8-2 lead in the 9th to the Cleveland Guardians, who would go on to win 12-9 in 11 innings. Blowing 6-run leads are rare, certainly, and it's especially rare to give up such a large lead in the 9th inning alone, but it happens. It happened to 2 different teams in the span of a week. Going back to 2001, the Seattle Mariners, who had set a modern record with 116 wins that season, blew a 14-2 lead against the Cleveland Indians. That's a 12-run lead, all blown within the last 3 innings of regulation. So clearly in baseball, even when a lead is safe, no lead is safe. Whether you're a good team, a bad team, or somewhere in the middle, a late inning collapse always lurks right around the corner. But the unwritten rules do not care, nor do those who uphold them, and that's because the unwritten rules are pretty dumb. Bringing in a position player to pitch, a relatively common decision made by baseball teams on the wrong end of blowouts, is pretty much the ultimate show of surrender in a baseball game. But for some reason, it doesn't violate any unwritten rules. However, if that position player throws 3 balls in a row, and then the batter swings on the very next pitch, that does. You would think that one team giving up on a game entirely is worse than one team trying to win by, quote, too much, but apparently it isn't. And what is the penalty for breaking these weird, arbitrary little rules? You get beaned, of course. I want to go back to that 14-2 comeback from 2001 for a minute. Who is that? Who is that guy speeding around the base paths, scoring the tying run in the bottom of the 9th? Who is that scoring the winning run in the 11th? That is Kenny Lofton. Alright, so now that we're all on the same page about what the unwritten rules are and why they suck, now I'm going to tell a little story about how the unwritten rules once ended a team's entire season, and it's awesome. Kenny Lofton is the hero of this story. Here's a picture of Kenny Lofton. Alright, now, here's a picture of Kenny Lofton's baseball reference page. What a career. Look at all those bold numbers. Kenny Lofton led the league in stolen bases every year from 1992 through 1996, but I want to really hammer home how elite of a base runner Kenny Lofton was. So, how about this? Here is a list of MLB's overall leaders in stolen bases since 1991. Look who's at the top of the list. Kenny Lofton, who hasn't even played a game since 2007. When you look at that list, and when you consider that only Juan Pierre has even really come close, there is an argument to be made that maybe nobody will ever steal as many bases again as Kenny Lofton did over the course of his career. Combine his fantastic speed with some outstanding on-base skills, and you pretty much have the perfect leadoff hitter. That is Kenny Lofton. In 2002, Lofton would sign a one-year contract with the Chicago White Sox, and at the trade deadline, he would be sent to the contending San Francisco Giants. With Lofton as their new leadoff hitter, the Giants would win the wild card and beat the Braves in 5 games in the division series to advance to the NLCS, where they would be taking on the St. Louis Cardinals. This is where the villain of our story enters, Tony La Russa. Now, there is no doubt that Tony La Russa is one of the most successful managers in the history of Major League Baseball, and that he is worthy of his status as a Hall of Fame baseball person. But he has not been without his share of controversies over the years. Most recently, La Russa, as the current manager of the Chicago White Sox, has come under fire for the team's underperformance in an already weak AL Central, combined with a few questionable in-game decisions this year, such as when he intentionally walked Trey Turner on a 1-2 count to face Max Muncy, who then proceeded to hit a 3-run home run. But while it's still certainly open to debate as to whether La Russa was the right choice to lead this White Sox team, all you really need to know for the purposes of this story is that Tony La Russa is perhaps a perfect personification of baseball's unwritten rules. In 2021, he publicly criticized one of his own players, DH Yermin Mercedes, for hitting a home run off of a Twins position player in a 3-0 count during a blowout game. Need I say more? So let's rewind a couple of decades. It's Game 1 of the 2002 NLCS, and Kenny Lofton's Giants are facing off against Tony La Russa's Cardinals team at Old Busch Stadium in St. Louis. To start off the game, Lofton is up to his usual leadoff hitter shenanigans. He draws a walk off of Cardinals ace Matt Morris in the first and comes around to score, 1-0 Giants. In the second, he comes back up and hits a 2-out single before stealing second. This kicks off a 2-out rally in which the Giants score 4 runs, putting San Francisco up 5-0. Then, when he comes up in the top of the third, Lofton hits a solo home run to right field to make it a 6-1 Giants lead. Kenny Lofton just broke an unwritten rule. Did you see it? Maybe you missed it. Hang on, I'll show it again. There. He took too long to start running the bases. I timed it, by the way. It took Lofton between 2 and 3 seconds to start jogging around the bases from the instant that he hit the ball. Not only that, but he flipped his bat, they said. But, I mean, not really. Like, it wasn't really a flip. It was a little bit of a flip, but it was also a little bit of a toss as well. Today, no one would bat an eye about that, but apparently in 2002, Kenny Lofton had just committed a cardinal sin, no pun intended. If you're a guy like Barry Bonds, the reasoning of the time went, you can admire your home runs because you're a power hitter. But if you're Kenny Lofton, a contact hitter, you can't do that because you don't have 600 home runs. Later in the series, broadcaster Rick Sutcliffe explained this and said that Kenny Lofton had brought whatever followed on himself. Now, saying this all out loud, it sounds like an unwritten rule that's just been made up on the spot. But when you think about it, All of the unwritten rules are kind of like that. When he comes back up in the 5th inning, Cardinals reliever Mike Crudale throws near Lofton's head. It's a decision that has undoubtedly been given the nod by Tony La Russa as retribution for taking between 2 and 3 seconds to watch his home run, and then not dropping his bat as directly as he could have. The bench is clear, naturally, as Lofton's teammates have to hold him back. Giants manager Dusty Baker even gets involved in the fray. While the throw is obviously intentional, nobody is ejected and the game resumes. The Giants take a 3-1 series lead through the first 4 games of this NLCS, but Lofton is held hitless for the rest of Game 1, as well as for the following 3 games. By the time Game 5 of the NLCS rolls around at Pac-Bell Park in San Francisco, the Cardinals are fighting for their playoff lives. The good news is that their ace, Morris, is back on the mound, hoping to send the series back to St. Louis. In the bottom of the 1st inning, for the first time since he homered off of him in Game 1, Lofton steps in against Morris. He flies out to right field. And just like that, this game becomes a tight pitcher's duel. Pitching to keep his team alive, Matt Morris is perfect through 3 innings, but Giants starter Kirk Reeder is also sharp. Kenny Lofton steps in against Morris to lead off the bottom of the 4th of a scoreless game. He's pegged in the back on the first pitch, clearly intentionally. Alright, let's run down a short list real quickly of why this is an absolutely terrible decision on the part of Tony La Russa and the Cardinals. Reason number 1, your team is in the playoffs. If you still need payback, maybe just wait until next season, you know? Reason number 2, your team is facing elimination. You cannot mess around. If you lose this game, your season is over. Reason number 3, this is a scoreless game in the middle innings. Reason number 4, there are no outs. Lofton was leading off the inning. Reason number 5, Kenny Lofton is one of the most prolific base runners in the history of baseball. Reason number 6, the next hitter, Rich Aurelia, is now for sure going to bunt Lofton up to second base because, reason number 7, the next 2 hitters up after him are Jeff Kent and Barry Bonds. So, yeah, not exactly the situation where I'd voluntarily put Lofton on base, but alright. As it turns out, Aurelia does in fact bunt Lofton over to second base, but then, if you can believe it, Morris gets out of the self-inflicted jam. Jeff Kent hits a sacrifice fly to center field, and then Bonds lines out to left, and that's it for the bottom of the 4th. Tony La Russa and the Cardinals got one last bit of retribution, and Lofton doesn't score. Mission accomplished, right? I don't have to tell you that in any baseball game, but especially in a close one like this, every base runner that you do or do not put on base can change the trajectory of the game dramatically. That's the beauty of baseball, but it's also the risk that the Cardinals have taken here. We'll see if it comes back to haunt them. The scoreless tie is finally broken by the Cardinals in the top of the 7th inning as Mike Matheny doubles on a ball that Kenny Lofton maybe should have caught. Morris reaches base on a sacrifice bunt turned failed fielder's choice, and then Fernando Vina hits a sac fly to Bonds, 1-0 Cardinals. In the bottom of the 8th, Lofton comes back up to bat. With 1 out, he slaps a single up the middle and advances to second on a Rich Aurelia base hit. Jeff Kent is then hit by a pitch, sending Lofton to third and bringing Barry Bonds to the plate with the bases loaded. The Cardinals bullpen has only just now started warming up though, and Morris has been electric up until this inning, so he stays in to face Bonds. On the first pitch, Bonds hammers a ball to the warning track, and while it is caught, it is more than deep enough to allow Lofton to tag up and score. Tie game. Morris escapes the jam without further damage, and we go to the 9th, tied 1-1. Giants setup man Tim Worrell takes over on the mound and gets Mike Matheny to fly out for the first out. Up next, pinch hitting from Morris. Wait a second. That's just Matt Morris. Okay, this particular tangent has absolutely nothing to do with Kenny Lofton or the unwritten rules of baseball, but let's just take a moment here to acknowledge how absolutely bizarre and bewildering this decision by Tony La Russa is. You are in the 9th inning of a tie game on the road, and your starting pitcher has been great, but also clearly was running on fumes in the 8th inning. Rather than going to literally anybody on your bench to pinch hit, and rather than going to literally any reliever in your bullpen, You are consciously choosing to virtually guarantee that your team doesn't score here so that you can send your laboring starter back out for a sudden death bottom of the ninth in the hopes that he can maybe send this game into extra innings and you can hopefully win it there. Do I have that right? La Russa, you strategic genius. I'm all in. So Morris strikes out looking, obviously, and then Worrell works around a 2-out single, and just like that, we are headed for the bottom of the ninth. If a single Giants run scores, they win the pennant, and the Cardinals' season is over. For perhaps the final time that this will ever happen in Major League history, a team starter comes back out for the bottom of the ninth of a tied postseason game on the road. And for a minute, it looks like a brilliant decision. The first two Giants hitters are retired quickly. Tony La Russa looks like a genius. He's 1 out away from having successfully forced this game into extras. But Morris is tired, and quickly the bottom of the Giants order ambushes him. David Bell and Sean Dunston hit back-to-back singles, and suddenly the pennant-clinching run is on second base with 2 men out. Tony La Russa has seen enough. He comes from the dugout and finally removes Morris for reliever Steve Klein. The season hangs in the balance, and look who's stepping up to the plate.
Kenny Lofton 2-on. That one to right field. Is it going to be the ball game? Up with it. Play coming. Drew the throw to the plate. The Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this first episode of Inning Extras. I created this channel because I love baseball, and I thought it would be a fun way to try and share this love of baseball with other people. If you liked this video and want to see more, please leave a comment, subscribe, thumbs up, and make sure to follow the Inning Extras Twitter if you want to see any of my baseball ramblings there. Thanks.